so that you can refer back to this whenever you have a doubt. So first I'll start with a overview of a compute cloud that we have. Your projects will be done on this cloud. Okay. So the rationale behind us setting up this cloud can be found on GitHub Sham Seti Pluto. It gives you an idea of what we're trying to do. In essence, it is giving a uniform wrapper over financial data sets. So instead of going to different sources, collecting this data, putting it in a database, and trying to sort of maintain it on a going forward basis, all you need to do is log into Pluto, and you can access it through R and Python through a standard interface. And I'm assuming that all of you will be doing your projects in R. So it makes my life a lot easier if you do it in R. In R, all you need to know is DPLYR to access the underlying data sets. Now, in terms of what it is that is available, right? The R sort of documentation facilities are kind of lagging in terms of what Python offers. So if you're just browsing the documentation, you're better off doing the using Python's documentation. So the library that is available on Python is called Pluto Pipe, and you can just go through the data sets that are available on read the docs. Okay, so these are all the different data sets that are available right now. You can click through different things based on what you need. For example, if you're using indices, it gives you like a sample code on how, for example, if you want to fetch the last 10 days of India VIX levels, this is how you do it in Python, right? And the same thing is, and you'll see a link to the notebooks here. One link will take you to the Python notebook, which is basically a replication of what you see here. The other one will take you to the R notebook. So these R notebooks are basically like the bare bones. It gives you the bare bones sort of API docs to access the underlying data. So if you're familiar with DPLYR, if you're not, then I suggest that you get familiar with it as soon as possible. It's fairly intuitive. So the way this is set up is you first initialize the data set, right? So this basically creates an R object called indices. If you're curious, you can look at the code. It's all open source. So if you want to see what this indices actually does, it is you can look at the source code. It just creates an R object. Okay, and this R object has different methods. So one of the methods is India VIX time series. Okay, so all that this method returns is basically a lazy evaluated DPLYR object, which you can then filter and use just like how you would query a database. So if you just want the last 10 days of India VIX, you can just do this top n, which which is a SQL equivalent of limit 10 or top 10, and you say you order it by timestamp, right? And this will just give you the last 10 days worth of wicks, right? So when you do this, and when you say print, that's when this whole object is actually evaluated and run. So until that point in time, it is just code. There's nothing running on the server, right? So this way, you can actually access any data set. You can do all your filters and transforms, whatever complicated stuff you want to do. And at the end, you can either do a print to just observe the data like how it is doing now, um, or you can pipe it into a data frame and and get this done. So how do you go about accessing all of this, right? So the way you do it is you go to Pluto.studio, right? So it just says sign in with GitHub. So you need to have a GitHub account in order to get into Pluto.studio. And GitHub accounts are free, so you create a free GitHub account and and get it. Good. So Pluto.studio is nothing but Jupyter Hub. So if you have, so I've been told that you guys know Jupyter notebooks, like most of your Python and R classes have been in this. So you will get this, you must be familiar with what's going on here. So for your project, so what you should do here is basically create a directory. Right? So call it what you want, but just create a directory for yourselves and create an R notebook. Make sure you don't leave it as untitled because this is something that everybody does. Just give it some name. Now, let me go back to the sample, right? I can just copy paste this. Right? So you can, so this till, I mean, at least so far, this is just a notebook. You should be pretty familiar with this. Now, here's where the differences start. So if you go to a typical notebook, you will find run commands here. So that is gone. We don't have those run commands. They have been replaced by this button. It just says upload and run. Okay. So you just click on that. So what is happening here is this whole notebook is being sent to the to the backend server, which is getting processed within our sort of compute cloud, which is behind the firewall, and and sent back for processing, and the results are sent back. So the notebook refreshes as soon as the results come back. Okay, all the errors and everything will be shown here. right? So the errors are all shown in the notebook itself. So this can be a good way of debugging this this whole thing. As to why this is an error, not sure why, because this worked before. So if you find any issues here, raise the issue on GitHub. So go to Pluto R issues and raise it here. So unless you raise it here, I don't know what is going on. From a if something's really goofed up, I wouldn't be able to tell. So this is a good way of telling me that something's not working. Let's see if this helps. Okay, let me take a look at why this top end rank doesn't work, and I'll get back to you. But it's something that's worked recently, so so let's move on to the way in which you can present your work, right? So if you go to your GitHub account now, after you've run this, notebook, it would have created a repository called Plutons, right? And there is a thing called project demo, which is the folder that you created. And within that folder, your notebook will be there. Along with the entire history of whatever it is that you've done. So if you want to go back to the earliest one, so it'll be there, right? So it'll be there as the request. This is what we typed up. Then and the latest one will be at the response. This is the response from the server for you guys. So when you actually see this, you will get the latest output of the notebook here. So in terms of project deliverable, right, this notebook is the deliverable for me. So when you the project proposal that you give me should be a notebook. So in the notebook you can have markdowns, right? So give it a decent title. And subtitles. Right? So this is what I expect, as a project proposal. Just do this, and and let me know when it's ready. If you face any issues, use GitHub's issue setup, right, to do it. And all your projects will be backed up on GitHub anyways. So, saving your work, etc., it's not a big deal. It'll be there, and you can share it with your faculty and whatnot to show progress reports. And in the end, what I expect is basically, um, you know, a notebook where everything is kind of documented, in Markdown itself, um, what it is that you're trying to do, as a preamble to actually doing it, right? And then charts and so on and so forth. Um, if you have trouble getting started, from a code slash what is possible kind of point of view, there's a whole bunch of these notebooks on this link. Right, go to Stockwise Plutons, and there are quite a bit of these. I wrote, and with decent descriptions on what each one of them is about. So if you have trouble thinking, about how to get through something, you will find a solution in one of these notebooks. Okay. So today, what did I do? Six hours ago. Okay. So hang on a second. So this is basically, just a simple charting setup that that pulls the investments that foreign investors made in the cash market, for debt, equity, and hybrids over an entire period of time. Right. So when I say get familiar with DPLYR, this is what I meant. Like, you should be able to sort of understand what is going on here, right? So this gives you an idea of what how the data is being sort of set up here, and it's just a simple plot, right? Using ggplot. So I think, from a familiarity with DPLYR, if you can understand what is going on here, you're sort of 90% on your way. And so basically, from a project point of view, I expect sort of decent markdown explanation of what it is that you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, and then the code that follows, along with your description of why it behaved the way it did, why the observed variable did the way behaved the way it did, and so on and so forth. So once this is set up, it should be fairly easy to go. Most of the communication, if something bombs like this, right, put it on GitHub, so that I'll be able to, look into it. And if you have any question about documentation, right? So the first stop is, so the first stop is Pluto Pipe. Read the docs. So this has everything that that is available. All the data sets and and what is inside those data sets are available here, are documented here, because our documentation is non-existent at this point. So if you actually go to R, you will find examples, right, which is just code. It's not a notebook. And you will, if you look at the code, you know, for any of these, right, it just points you back to the read the docs URL. Okay. And the sample notebook for this particular data set can be found here. So you'll find both the links, you know, on on the R code base, but it is not as nice as what you'll see on Python documentation. But in essence, that's what it does is fairly simple. It just gives you a sort of window into our internal database. So don't waste too much time about understanding how Pluto works. Just make it work for you. Okay.